everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Aspire to Inspire podcast. I am your host, Lottie Bazley, and we have had the pleasure of speaking to some pretty impressive people on the podcast so far, including some really extraordinary women, and today is no exception to that. Today, I am joined by CEO Ioanna Onasi. It is a joy to be here with you today, and I will waste no time handing the mic over to you to give us a little introduction to yourself and to your business.
Awesome. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Super excited for our discussion today. For context, I'm the co-founder and CEO of Dextego, which is an AI sales coaching company. So think about like athletes prepare for their games. We help sales teams prepare for conversations they're about to have with prospects. We help them basically develop their soft skills. And we're based in New York, but if you can't tell by my accent, I'm originally from Greece.
Amazing. Thank you so much and welcome. So you do bill yourself as a Gen Z founder. So first things first, can you remind us what years Gen Z encompasses?
Oh, I don't know if I know the exact answer to that, but I know I'm right by the cusp because I think if you're like 27, you're considered a millennial. I'm 26, but I'm not quite sure what age they start at.
Well, this was it because I was having a little Google ahead of time, and it seems to be that there are some boundaries there. Hey, like horoscopes, like depending on which sign you are.
But I know there's also some debate around it. Like some believe it's a couple more years before or after.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Mm-hmm. Well, I fall firmly into the millennial category, so I'm safe in there. But it'd be great to hear a little bit about your career path in your own words, and then we'll really get into what it means to be a Gen Z leader in the workplace.
Sure, yeah. So if I take us back, I would say when I was like in high school even, I had a big passion for sustainability. I actually was coming to the US every summer for summer programs in different universities doing sustainable business courses. And somehow that led me to sustainable fashion. I actually consider, sustainability to be much more than just the environmental component and truly be about long-term impacts, whether that's relationships, businesses. I tend to think like that. So, taking my creative side, I got into fashion and was working at Marc Jacobs. That I realized, it's not the most sustainable company, and so then I went and worked as the COO for a sustainable fashion organization called Fashion Revolution, where we built the first summer program in Greece, and we were basically the bridge between US and Greece, helping professionals attend the summer program. Fast forward, when I did my master's at Pace University, I focused on strategic management, and I was working for the chair of the management department, whose expertise was in talent development and strategic HR. And I fall in love with developing talent because I had studied psychology for my bachelor's, and I felt like it was really a combination of all of my interests: psychology, business, and it felt like a puzzle. Like, how can we develop high potential employees? How can we find them? What motivates them? All of that. So that led me to take an internship in a startup in HR, and I was really in charge of hiring international talent from Paris, New York, Hong Kong, Lisbon, Portugal, and developing a strategy where I think, challenged myself and learned a bunch of things, but also fall in love with startups because you always wear multiple hats and the pace is extremely fast. So I quickly improved and actually became the VP of People and Chief of Staff. That company is called Aptivio. It's also in the AI space. And again, fast forward to today, that led me to create my own startup in the AI sales coaching space, because I truly saw the difficulties and the challenges that come with coaching and trying to develop Gen Z and young people might not have access to executive coaches, might not really have that like long experience that's required to speak to C-suite people, have executive communication. So that's very, high level, my background. And on a fun fact note, I continue with my creative side by making art. So I do abstract art and I just love painting.
Cool. I love this, how kind of all of these different bits that you enjoyed doing like kind of came together and you were like, actually, I'm going to start a business. I'm going to take all of these things that I enjoy and I'm going to make this a job. But I love that. And also, I mean, it sounds like you're a super creative person with all of these ideas, but also doing some artwork too. I tend to dabble myself, but probably not anywhere near as good as or creative as you seem to be. But maybe we can come back to that shortly.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Gen Z, they're kind of known for being this sort of digital first generation that are really deeply immersed in social media and kind of online communication. So how has this kind of digital first mindset shaped your leadership style?
Yeah, I really think that what social media has done is it makes people feel very connected to people they see on their feed, and they make them feel like they know them, right? Which can be good and bad. I'm assuming for a famous person that can be a little bad too because there's no privacy, but for not so famous people, I think it's actually good because as a startup founder, it creates this bond. Like you're really trying to bring something to the world out of nowhere. And by trying to be more present on social media, I've gotten lots of positive feedback that people want to either work with me or they understand what I do and they feel like some sort of connection. So definitely that trend, if you will, has made me be more online, especially on LinkedIn, less in other platforms. But without that social media component, I think it's also very hard to do market research nowadays. 'Cause, people, especially startup founders, don't go to consulting firms and ask them for market research as they did 10 years ago. It's mostly going online, seeing who else does this, and what do they stand for, what are their values, how they promote themselves. It's all social media. So it has impacted the way I would say we also market ourselves as a company. Me personally, how I position myself as a thought leader out there, and has also helped me create that community. Really, every single hire we've done or partner we've acquired is all through social media communications. Less than, yeah, I think other companies that I know their leaders are maybe Gen X that is more traditional. They still go and meet people in person, and that's not to say that I don't, but I think it's much of a stronger connection when they've been seeing you for a while online, and then
Yeah,
you
yeah,
also meet them in person, and it
yeah,
creates that idea that hey, I've been following your journey. I know what you've been doing. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
it's very
That's
interesting.
Yeah, such a good point. And like you say, it kind of you already start to build up that personal connection with a person, and you don't have to do heaps of work with that person yourself, right? They just see you, they form this connection with you, and then by the time they meet you in a room, they think like, "Oh, I've been, friends with this person for ages." Or yeah, yeah, a really interesting concept. So you talked a bit there about kind of connection and community specifically on the LinkedIn platform. So what kind of things are you doing on LinkedIn there?
Yeah, I try to post a lot of short videos where I break out a topic, and usually my whole idea is as a Gen Z founder, I want to be able to accelerate other Gen Z founders' journeys, but also other underrepresented founders' journeys. And usually, the type of content you see out there for founders is founders that have really made it. Like they're huge, they've done exits, they're like billionaires, millionaires, and they tell you how it was. But there's such a big disconnect from when they were actually doing it, when they were in the hard parts of really startup world. And that's why I think there's value in sharing what I'm doing now in the 0 to 1 stage rather than maybe 5 years from now. And I just speak to my, maybe younger self, things I wish I knew, or ideas that I think people can leverage even if they've done businesses for like 10, 20 years, because it just brings a new perspective. And that's really what I do. I share tips. I share how I see Gen AI impacting a lot the workforce, talent development, sales enablement. And I also try a lot to hype up others. Uh, I think LinkedIn is a place, of course, for thought leadership, but also a place where you can truly build those relationships. I've made some great friends the last 2 years from that. So try to always comment and cheer others and say, "Hey, I see you. Congrats for this," or "Keep the
Love
good
that.
work." Because that's what keeps us going, right? Like the fact that we're seen and we feel the energy that people are reciprocating what we're putting out there in the world. I think keeps people going.
Hmm. I love that. And I think it's really, I have a question about transparency coming up, but I think it's really nice to hear those like, hey, sometimes this is quite hard. Like it's not plain sailing. I founded a business and here I am as a billionaire. But that in between stage sounds like the bit that you're talking about, which I think is refreshing probably for people to hear.
I think most of the times it's hard, and honestly, like I always talk about the ups and downs and the pivots we had to go through, because it's just the reality. And I truly think before starting a business, I wasn't aware of how hard it would be,
Mm.
and no one is as aware. Because if they were, they wouldn't jump into it, like, for sure. But the funniest part is meeting people that are now starting and they have
Hmm.
this excitement. It's like a freshman at college. You don't know
Yeah.
what you're about to experience, so you're super
Yeah.
excited. And it's like you need both. You need to have these people in your life and the people that have been there, done that. So there is a
Yeah.
balance and they can
Yeah.
hold you grounded.
Yeah. Love that. Really like that. So you did talk there about kind of short videos that you are creating on LinkedIn. And something that I think about quite regularly as an internal communicator is this difference between how people are digesting information kind of outside of work. So things like TikToks, Instagram, WhatsApp, voice notes, even, versus how we kind of communicate with our employees in business. I think it's still often a lot of written communication. Maybe some companies are kind of venturing to videos. But how do you think, or what do you think the style of communication that we're seeing on social media, how should that influence how we communicate with our people internally?
I think it's a fantastic question. And the most important thing to recognize is that people learn in different ways. So always having a variety of styles of communications is important. However, what usually takes place is you go with the preferred version of that leader, right? So if I like written communication, now everybody has to do it, and that might not be the way they would prefer it, and as a result, it will impact their productivity. So acknowledging and understanding how people like to communicate is important, but also think about the opportunities we have now of adjusting due to Gen AI. What I mean is we can take that written format and turn it into a podcast and turn it into a short audio clip. It's so easy, or changing the style, like bullet point versus paragraph in seconds, leveraging ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever. So there's no excuse. What I'm trying to say is to not be flexible. But in my opinion, depending on what's the demographic of your team, if it is Gen Z, definitely short form videos and communication styles that referred to current uh, culture related things. Like I always see, it's so clear. Going back to LinkedIn, I can see what companies put out there, and sometimes there's companies that love to send gifs or like post, these fun like 30-second animated post based on like a movie character or like I don't know something happening. And it's like, okay, you can tell this is their culture versus someone that's more traditional and they write more professionally, because it's like when you read the post, you kind of hear a voice in your head, right? Like you read it with a persona. So what feedback I've gotten is that as a company, you need to choose what's your persona and kind of stick with it. And then the rest, I think, will kind of either assimilate it or reject it. But you can do everything. So choose 2 to 3 means of communication that make sense based on your team. In my opinion, as I said, if you have Gen Z, definitely videos, but also podcasts are really a big hit nowadays. So maybe you try like a small pilot and see if it goes well. Also, to your point, internal communication might be very different than external communication, and that's also okay. So yeah, in our case, we do a lot of written when it comes to internal communication, but externally we try to do more video based.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And I think that really resonates in terms of doing what is authentic to you, right? And, we're talking about audiences and what the audience wants, but your point about understanding the leader's preference as well, because, if you get someone who's really uncomfortable in front of the camera to do this video just because we want a video, it's not going to be as authentic or be work as well, So I really like that point there. And I touched on the fact that I had a question about transparency, and I think it fits in nicely with this authenticity stream that we're talking about now. So something that I feel very strongly about as a communicator is transparency. And I will often advocate for transparency over other things,
Yep.
especially when it comes to communicating reasoning behind tricky decisions. I think it helps to increase trust, it avoids rumors, it demonstrates accountability, and heaps of other things. And I believe that Gen Z kind of tends to prioritize transparency, but sometimes leaders maybe feel like it could lead to potential backlash or panic people, or even would just leave the leader themselves vulnerable to any criticism about that decision. So how do you personally kind of strike that balance of knowing when to say something versus when not to say something?
Yeah, you bring up such a good point where I've actually lived it through many times and I've seen reactions, both positive and negative. And sometimes, ignorance is bliss, but I also fully understand the need and the urgency to be transparent sometimes. But I also think there's categories of situations. Um, if something, for instance, is happening in the business that doesn't impact employees, and it's more like kind of nice to know, maybe you don't need to tell them everything because it could be a distraction. If it's something that does impact the business and their security, of course, I think you kind of also have a responsibility, not just it would be nice, like you have to be transparent. And then there's some super important things where you need to be transparent to employees and to all stakeholders at the same time. So you need to kind of know the topic you're thinking of, where does it fit in these categories, and have like an action plan. But overall, I also see that Gen Z sometimes want to be considered like equals within a business, because if you if you want transparency, that means you should be in a position to do something with the news you will hear. However, sometimes they want that, but they don't act on it. And that's where I think the difficulty comes, and where leaders sometimes push back and say, no, I don't want to be in a position that I always have to over communicate, because I don't feel like there is a benefit for the business. It's also distraction for that leader sometimes to spend all their time communicating with every individual across the ladder, right? So I think there's sometimes conflict of interest between leadership
Yeah.
and the rest of employees. And I can
Yeah.
definitely see both sides. That's why I say the easiest way to go about it is just understand what type of communication is this. Is this necessary to say yes or no? Um, and Gen Z, they kind of what's that phrase? They want the whole cake and
And they want the whole cake and eat it. Yeah.
yeah. It's like, okay, if you want me to treat you like an equal, put more effort, talk to me, communicate back. Don't just think that it will be one way. So it's a collaborative effort, and to improve communication, a company for sure has to come from the top down. But it's also what pressure do you create? Like, as an employee, do you tell your manager straight up, "Hey, I wish you communicate better," or is it something you just say to your colleague, "Hey, I wish my manager communicate better"? So, how are you making clear that this is your expectation and the way you want to work so that you feel safe and you feel productive? Because sometimes the leader might not see that. They might have no clue that the team wants more because nobody told them.
Yeah, I love that. And it's really about kind of the thing I've taken from that is kind of it's about that like setting boundaries, just as you would with like a relationship outside
Yeah,
of work, right? It's about figuring out what it is that you want, what it is that you need, and the benefit that you feel from that, and kind of explaining that clearly. But again, I loved what you said about the two-way relationship thing, right? If the leadership is kind of giving you the respect to tell you about these decisions that they're making, then they also expect that respect back, because we're treating each other as equals, right?
100%. And I think the best place to bring this up is during the interview. Like, ask the
Yeah.
company, hey, what's your communication style? How frequent
Yeah.
is your communication? And are you transparent about difficult situations?
Mm.
Or I will know about them after the fact. And then
Yeah.
hold them accountable. Like, if a month in there's no
Yeah.
communication and they promise you that, just say it. Hey, that's not what I expected.
Yeah, absolutely. Set those boundaries from even day minus
Yeah,
whatever, right? Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
So we've talked a bit about Gen Z, obviously, but as a Gen Z leader, you are working with multi-generational teams, right? So how do you navigate that different communication preferences that we have between Gen Z, millennials, Gen X, or boomers to make sure that you don't lose that alignment or collaboration?
Yeah, it's not the easiest thing. I think, of course, you have a component that's very personal. Like, uh, just because you're part of a generation, it doesn't mean you will have a preferred way always. Like, you might, for instance, be very casual in the way you speak, and you might be a Gen X versus you can be a Gen Z and try to be super serious. So there's all sorts of things out there, and my first always reaction when I meet someone is just to observe, kind of let them lead to see their preferred style, and then try to match that energy. If I feel it matches mine, right? Like, sometimes it's a choice. You can go out of your comfort zone and trying to please someone else, but sometimes that might not be worth it because you don't find an alignment. For example, I believe I can easily do a lecture and go to university and present in a serious mode, and I can also be in a room with three people and be very casual and still get the work done. So it depends on your adaptability as a person. In my case, because indeed I work with all sorts of people, what I've seen is that the older someone is, usually the less okay they are with being vague. So they need a structure. So what I do is I send an agenda before the call. I play back the agenda during the call. I make sure we leave with next steps. If you do that to a Gen Zer, maybe that is extra stress. Maybe that's too much. So you need to be a little more um, unstructured, yet make sure that there is some sort of next step. You can't leave it, in the air, or else they won't do what you're asking for. So, there is a range, and I'm trying to find where this person is, but I also try to make clear what my expectations are. So when I hire, for example, and that has happened to me actually twice, where I hired to Gen Z and I set my expectations in front of anything else. And I said, hey, I totally understand you might not have the time, for example, to do X, Y, Z. Just tell me before it becomes an issue. I'm not gonna be mad if you tell me. I'll be mad if you don't, and then you just present the problem to me because I want to have the time to react. And unfortunately, many times when someone is used to a specific way of working, and it might be that they don't communicate and they just deliver, they're not able to adapt to my communication style, which is, hey, I want those frequent check-ins. Or else it kind of makes me like want to micromanage, and that's not what I would rather do. I would rather spend my time elsewhere. But yeah, sometimes we don't find a middle path, and then I'm like, hey, I told you from the beginning what my expectation was, and you agreed. So I think, yeah, it's that simple. You just have to be straight up about what you expect, and as much as you can, try to be adaptable. But outside of that, it is really hard to be able to work with multiple people all the time, and so it's okay if the person listening is in that spot where they feel like they can't do it 100% and show up as their best selves, because we are really asked in this current workplace to work with so many diverse people, which on the one hand is phenomenal because of the ideas and the passion and the perspectives. But on the other, it is really hard. And that's okay. We're all trying to navigate it. And I always say, like, enjoy being in the middle part of the complex situation. Because if everything was perfect, it would be boring too, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And that kind of boundary setting is something that really resonates a lot with me, because when I think about my role as an internal communicator and we talk about communication, again, we talk about it differently inside of work and outside of work, right? Like it's perfectly normal to set boundaries with friends, partners, family members in terms of your communication styles outside of work, but
Right.
that's not really something that we see in the workplace, right? So I really like this kind of fresh take that you have on, set those boundaries from the start, and then if they're not being met, it's easier to have that conversation, right?
Yes, and you don't feel bad because
Yeah,
you
yeah,
told
yeah.
from the beginning. Versus if you didn't, then you just tried to kind of figure it out as you went. That would make
Hmm.
the conversation harder.
Hmm. For sure, for sure. So we talked a little bit about kind of bridging the gap then between the different generations, but I hope you don't mind. I have a bit more of a personal question now. So something that I have experienced with myself is kind of age discrimination.
Mm-hmm.
So a while ago, I had a manager who was a bit older than me, who had heaps of industry experience, but seemed a little bit kind of stuck in their ways. It was very kind of, we're going to do it this way because this is the way that we've always done it. And when I tried to challenge that, I was often met with things like, well, you've not been doing this as long as me, or, do your time and then give me the advice. So I wanted to ask you, as a very, very impressive, but also younger leader, is that something that you've ever experienced, and how would you deal with that?
Yes, great question. And I actually want to combine it with being a woman too. And I'll tell you firstly something I've heard from Leila Hormozi, who's a female founder of like $1 million company, CEO of acquisition.com. Because a lot of women and a lot of younger women come to me and say the same, like, hey, they don't listen to me because I'm young, or hey, I spoke to that investor and they didn't even think I can do it, all of that. And I've also said this to myself many times, especially when I started Dextego. And I also realized that it's kind of our default excuse to ourselves when something goes wrong. But what might simply be happening behind the scenes is just a skills gap. And it is again a characteristic of Gen Z. We want everything and we want it now, and there's no patience, and we don't want to be like our parents, like 10 years waiting for a promotion and a ladder, a lateral path. And unfortunately, social media has not helped because we see these sudden, successes from like um, even like artists, and it really is kind of distorting the reality because you need a lot of years of experience to be an expert with something. You do need to go through difficult situations to get to the success. And so sometimes, us saying, hey, they didn't respect me because of this and that. Do you really know that for a fact? Like, have they told you, hey, I don't respect you because you're a young person? If not, then it's just an assumption. And that assumption can literally just be a projection of what you're thinking in your head as your personal insecurity that you're young in a room of older people that are much more experienced and are showing up or have just a stronger personality, they're more extroverted than you. So I'm not disregarding the fact that it can clearly just be AIDS discrimination, but also know that sometimes we make it bigger in our heads than it is. And it can simply be that we haven't won their respect because we don't have enough to show. Because yes, our ideas and what's happening in our head might be awesome, but if you don't have that proof, unfortunately, today, proof is everything. And that proof comes either from social proof, like you get others to talk to them about how great you are, or you have a resume or skills that have gotten you somewhere and they can see that you did this before, so you can do it again with them. And so yeah, my experience has told me that it is 10 times harder when you're younger and a female to get that respect, but it's not impossible. And you win it by showing up, by taking the step, and by again being transparent, as you said, that hey, I might have not done this before, but for this and that reason, I believe I can do it, and that's what I've done so far. So, do you want to be part of this? Do you want to help? Do you want to be a mentor? Do you want to be a partner? But don't show up as, hey, I know everything and I'm better than you, so you better respect me even if I'm young, right? It's, I think, the way we portray, and again, like just checking in with ourselves that, hey, do we know for a fact that this is happening? If it
Mm-hmm.
is, then absolutely, I think you should speak up, whether it's your boss or your colleague or straight up to the person who did that discrimination and tell them, hey, that's not okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really refreshing way of thinking about it because you're right. Like there's clearly discrimination exists out there. We're not denying that. But what I'm hearing from what you're saying then is that it's kind of that imposter syndrome
Yes.
niggle that's coming in, right? But making sure that you're finding that balance between the confidence, like, hey, I'm here because I have
Yeah.
great ideas, or, I'm really creative, and understanding what your strengths are. It might not be your experience, but you have strengths in other areas that you can kind of push forwards to those people to help kind of get that respect from them. Yeah, for sure. So talking about kind of creating authentic relationships potentially with investors, but also, teams and clients, and you work, of course, in the industry of AI. So a lot of the stuff that we're hearing is that AI can make things kind of impersonal or feel a bit false, and you don't know whether you're getting an AI version of a message that someone sent, or, that authentic person. How do you try and kind of cultivate, maintain really authentic relationships in this kind of AI age?
Yeah, great question. I think something I've been vouching for the last years, and specifically when I speak to founders, is that we have a responsibility, whoever is making AI based tools, to make them for the better of the society. Um, in our case, we're truly trying to empower sales teams to get a better name for themselves, to be able to improve their interpersonal skills, build trust with clients, improve their active listening skills. So we use AI for truly empowering humans, which is a little ironic, but we don't want to replace anyone. There's companies out there that are actively working on automating and developing AI tools to replace employees.
Mm-hmm.
So on the first level, I think there's a founder responsibility, and it's also a call to action for anyone developing such tools to do it,
Mm-hmm.
not to replace, to do it to help us, to help society.
Mm-hmm.
There's another component when it comes to more like internal communication, to your point, which starts again from the top. If that leader uses ChatGPT and all of their posts are kind of a personal, the rest will do the same. There's also a lot of people I know that use ChatGPT to write all of their content social media, etc. It's one thing to say I use it to format my text or like ensure I don't have spelling mistakes, and another
Mm-hmm.
say I use it to write everything, because then you're portraying a fake version of yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So keeping it authentic the way you present to your team, you present to the world, you present on social media is very important. And there is another thing that I believe is very interesting here. Um, are we as a society preferring to speak to a flawed human, or are we creating an expectation that we prefer AI because it's perfect? If we go towards the second route, what happens is we get very disappointed because, to your point, AI is not perfect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we are creating a black or white scenario which I think is flawed as society. Instead of saying we prefer humans that just become better with the use of AI. It's
Mm-hmm.
not either or. It's not
Mm-hmm.
either we keep things as they are or we go straight up to AI and we're aiming for that perfection.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, it will take time to become perfect. It's not perfect whatsoever. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of companies still maintain the human in the loop to get to that
Mm-hmm.
perfection, and that's
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think the world keeps giving us these scenarios of where AI sorry is taking us either in the catastrophe or in that
Mm-hmm.
abundance, and there is
Mm-hmm.
really a world in between, and it's the world we're living currently in the present,
Mm-hmm.
where there's a lot of uncertainty
Mm-hmm.
and communication. Imagine like only AI based communication, right? Like imagine ChatGPT talk to itself and taking decisions for us. Is that the world we really want to live in, where AI lawyers and AI police is taking over, society?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't think so. I think um, being in a position where, for instance, doctors leverage AI to do their research faster and getting to creations and like drugs and new innovations overall faster is an amazing situation to be in. But
Mm-hmm.
leaving it all to AI is a scary world, and I don't know that we're ready for it.
Mm-hmm. No, I totally agree. And it's really one of those things about kind of finding that balance, right? We're not, well, as you say, some people are looking for AI to replace those certain things, but I think there's a lot of companies now, or a lot of people certainly even, that are just seeing AI to help advance certain skills, or like fill those gaps where they might be great at this one thing, but not so great at this one. And
Mm.
rather than try and use AI to, help elevate that it's like, actually, let me even the playing field with my skills using the help of AI, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, fabulous. Well, we are running out of time, unfortunately, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today. And I have really enjoyed this conversation and definitely have some personal things to take away. But just to pick up on something that you said earlier about wishing that you had someone like yourself when you were kind of starting out to sort of help you with that kind of business advice. Before I let you go, one final question for you. For those listening that might just be kind of starting out in their careers or considering a change, do you have one piece of advice that you wish that you'd gotten yourself when you were starting out?
Well, definitely to not take things personally. I think it's very hard when you put yourself out there and you're vulnerable to feedback. You might get a lot of rejection or many no's. I mean, the things I've heard in my career from, hey, you need to hire like a male and put them as CEO and then change it so you can get funding to you can do this to so many crazy things. I mean, not every piece of feedback is for you to actually do something with it. It's just a piece of feedback. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Don't take it personally. Just keep going and listen to your gut, but be open to, of course, learning from others and pivoting as need be. The reason why I created my blog, it's a Gen Z founder blog at Substract. It's really for that, like giving people actionable advice and just a different perspective. And I circled back, to what I said with LinkedIn about hyping up others. I think it's very important that what you want to receive, you put out there in the world. So if you need to find, for example, other Gen Z founders, go and make a Gen Z founder community. If you want more positive people, go connect with positive people. Like, so much is actually in our hands. And it's all about the perspective, because if you focus on the negative and what is against you, you will never start. So try to train your mind to think of what's positive and what's going well for you.
Absolutely. And I couldn't agree more with the whole kind of lifting each other up, right? I think, where there are people that you can help that aren't in the room where you're in the room, like absolutely anything that we can do, especially with younger founders, female founders, like, we should be able to help lift each
Yes.
other up, right? I say we there as if I'm a founder. Can't include myself in that group. But yeah, no, I absolutely love that. But thank you so much for joining us today, Ioanna. It's been a really interesting conversation. To all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have found today's conversation inspiring, you can connect with Ioanna on LinkedIn or take a look at the Dextego website, which we will add into the show notes for you all. But thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for joining us, Ioanna, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you so much. See you too.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Hey, if you're getting value from today's conversation, make sure you subscribe right now so you don't miss any future episodes of the Aspire to Inspire podcast.